Let's go. Let's go.
Mine should be listening to you. I'm sure it's also good.
And it's nice. There's somebody that is new to one.
Hi everybody, welcome. I've been saying this all year, but it's so nice to have people in person, in the store, doing things in real life. That said, one of our COVID adaptations was we received this very nice grant from Goethe Institute, which bought us all these nice cameras so we can do hybrid events and stream. So to let everyone know, we are going to be streaming, but the cameras are where they are. No one's going to be like in your face, like doing anything. But comments and your discussion will be broadcast. We may have people who want to speak from the viewers as well, which would be amazing. One of us will just like wait and read them out. I had to take notes because it's actually so busy this month. I couldn't remember everything that I wanted to tell you guys while we're all here. There's a lot of events this month because we're all ready to do things in real life again. So our Saturday story times are running. So we do kid stories and usually English plus one other language every Saturday at 9:30. Those are all happening upstairs in the mezzanine and the bookstore right now. And as part of the grant from Goethe, we have piles of books to give away to kids every weekend. So encourage kids to come and read with cool books. Right? It is amazing. On the 12th, Dudu Basani Dube is going to be here discussing with Ayanda Gaba about her new book, which is called Scarred. It's the 4th book from Ayanda. They will be here in this space, but I suspect it will fill up quickly, so I really encourage everyone to RSVP because this is the amount of space we have. On the 12th at 11 a.m.
On the 12th.
Yeah, Saturday, 1 week from now.
Yes.
Then on the 26th, we have a very full day. So in the morning, we're going to be launching Traded by Congo Alexis. Lorraine Stoy is going to be in conversation. And in the afternoon, Nelly Page Mashenge is coming to talk about the beloved Mashenge. On the 26th, there's also a pile of things happening at the Rand Club. James Finley's going to be doing his book talk that morning as well. And on the 9th at the Rand Club, 9th of April, is the book fair day. So the building's going to be full of book vendors, people selling antiques, all kinds of other cool and interesting things. There's food and drink, and it's a lovely time. The last one in November was amazing, and I had to go and do sports with my kids, and I love my children, but I did regret in my heart. So that is all of my announcements. I'm going to introduce Alicia Thompson, who is the deputy chairman of the Rand Club, which is the building we are in right now, and Fred Khumalo, the author of the moment. Fred is super generous always coming here. He's also written the introduction for a book that we're publishing as part of a different program to revive South African classics. So many South African books got lost during the period of censorship. Either were censored or not published or were burned or banned and all of those things. So we've been going into the archives to find books in the public domain that have been lost. So we're starting with Herbert Lomo, and we're doing, it's not an anthology, I think there's only two, we're going to call it a duology. I don't know if it's a word, but it is now. So it's The Valley of a Thousand Hills, which is an epic poem really paying tribute to the traditional Zulu deities. And the other one is The Girl Who Killed to Save, which is the story of the Xhosa cattle killings in the 1800s, which if you've read Heart of Redness, it's on that same period, it's that event. This play was written in response to a play that a British woman had written, and basically when Khumalo read it, he was like, oh my God, what was she thinking? And wrote it telling it from the perspective of the spirit medium of Activision. So that is in the final stages of production. There's a local artist who is redesigning all of the imagery that was inside of the original publication. So we're hoping that we'll be launching that and be inviting Fred again in May or June sometime. With that, we'll hand it over to you guys. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Quentin. Good evening, everybody.
15.
15. Oh!
The others are written in my mother tongue, so they are not readily available to the public in Zulu.
Okay, we'll get back to that point. But something I've always thought I've never asked the author, how do you celebrate when you have a book published? Because I saw you posted a picture the other day of 2 tons of fun, inexclusive books on the display and said, woohoo, my book is there, with you. But yeah, isn't that quite a kick? When you...
It's something very big. I mean, the book only came out on the 14th of Feb. It's number 5 on the bestseller list at Exclusive Books.
Wow.
Next to Dion Mayer, ahead of John Grisham, sorry, not Griffin. So yeah, it does wonders to the ego. You know, it swells like a fat cook.
Yeah.
You're made of sun-raising flour. So it's good for the ego. So how do I celebrate? Get myself a good bottle of whiskey or wine.
Okay.
Sit down with friends, etc.
Oh, okay, that sounds good. Then just so that we don't spoil the book, how many people tonight were here have read 2 tons of fun? Yeah, but okay, so we won't have any spoilers, I promise you. But so for those who have started reading the book, did you Google the title song?
I didn't know that it was the name of a collective band or something. Yes, and after reading, I'm like,
Yeah.
that's clever.
So I actually grew up with that song and I always thought it was Ashford and Simpson.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, you're gonna learn lots about counted life and music. And so onto the book, Fred. I've been a bit of a stalker on Facebook for Fred, but Fred says writing 2 tons of fun was such fun, and I would describe it to anybody. If anybody asked me, I'd say off the bat, this is a light read. It's a holiday read. You can read it in a weekend. It really is. It just flows. The story, it's really just an easy read until you get to the end, and then you think, whoa, this is actually a heavyweight of a book, actually. And we'll get back to what hit me, how I felt at the end. But there's subjects in this book that start with like the pervasive legacy of apartheid, spatial and economic inequality, unequal education, witchcraft, homophobia, and that's just for starters. Then, just for fun, because Fred had fun writing this, he throws in like sexual politics, violence, and it's hectic violence, and it's not confined to gender-based violence. There's different forms of violence in the book. Obviously, your teenage angst, because the lead character is a teenage girl, and you think, oh, this is quite a book. So Fred, what I wanted to ask you, you describe yourself on Facebook again as a middle-aged, middle-class suburban black man. What inspired you to speak about, to write a story that incorporates all these subjects, but from the perspective of a 14-year-old girl from Alexandra?
Yeah, good evening everyone. Thanks for coming. I live in Wendywood, which is part of the poorer section of Centre. And across the road from us is Alex. So when I run out of beverages and the bottle stores are closed, I go to Alex. So every time you go there, you do that. The contrast between the 2 neighborhoods, which are divided by this road, the contrasts are so overwhelming. They hit you in the face. So I thought, how do I celebrate or bring the story of Alex to the public domain in a manner that is accessible, that is memorable. So I thought, let me create 2 characters that come from either side of this divide, of this road that divides the 2. So I created these characters, girls, 14-year-old, from different economic and social-cultural backgrounds, to use them as my springboard to launch myself into the heart of the story. So obviously the main challenge for me was, as you correctly, accurately described me, I'm old.
I don't know.
I'm middle-aged. And I thought to do justice to this story, I had to jettison my identity as this omniscient narrator. I had to inhabit, had to get into the mind and heart of a 14-year-old kid from an impoverished background, which was a challenge for me. The age divide, well, obviously, I grew up in a township as well, so there are things that the narrator speaks about which are second nature to me because I grew up in the township. However, time has marched on. I grew up in the township back in the 70s and 80s. Life has changed for many of us. How do you then inhabit the mind of a 14-year-old? My daughters were of great help in that regard, because I would be dropping them off at school and they would be telling me all the stories that teenagers tell when they think we are not listening. So I would eavesdrop on their conversations and about fashion, about boys, about music and all that. So it comes through in the story. So credit goes to my daughters, who helped me navigate myself into the mind and heart of a 14-year-old black girl growing up in contemporary South Africa and grappling with all the stuff that comes up in the book. The xenophobia, GBV, and everything else that's there. But obviously it's not all gloom and doom as you observed. There's music, there's fashion, there's girls talking about boys, all that kind of thing. So I tried my best to fully realize the lives of these 14-year-old girls from the different side of the tracks, so to speak.
Okay. And how old are your daughters?
Well, now they are in their 20s. They're at university. So they went to, like the other kid in the book, Janine, they went to better schools, you know. So they have a different story to tell. But they did interact with kids of the Latos ilk and background. So it was through them, again, that I got reminded of the past that I come from as well. You know, that kind of thing.
When did you start writing the book? And why I'm also, because the book is actually set from 2009 to like 2011. So did you just start writing it quite recently? Or had it been like, what's the word I'm looking for? Had it been brewing in your mind for the
Yes,
last time?
so I wrote it, I submitted it, let me see, I finished it before COVID. Let me see. No, sorry. I finished it just before the first lockdown. But it is set before the advent of COVID. So some of the issues that it touches on are still relevant. I mean, xenophobic expressions started in 2008, remember, the first major one in Alex, 2008. But the book is set in 2009 or 10.
No, so one, I'm only going to leave two small excerpts from the book. So the first one touches on what you say now. So she says, Lerato says, and so this is Lerato now, you know, who's, well, that's my impression.
Yeah, reflecting.
Yeah. Alexander Township was crazy, but so was the rest of South Africa. At least Alexander was honest about being crazy. The irony of it all is that I never hated Alexander. instead, I felt bound to its fate. I felt I was a part of it, for better or for worse. It was only Alexandra that inspired me with the audacity of hope. With Alexandra on my mind, I could not, at that time or any other time, afford to throw my hands in the air and mope. I had to shed a tear over what had happened, and then I had to move on. So this is Lerato. She's a survivor. She's us, guys. You know what I mean? You have to get up. You have to do what needs to be done. And what's coming out, I don't know how to say that in English. But that excerpt made me think about, do you think of Lerato? Well, when I say now, I mean 10 years later. Do you sit and imagine and think, where would Lerato be now? Because the book ends when she's 18 years old. But it also ends when she's 28. She's narrating the story, sort of 10 years later. Do you have any idea what the 28-year-old Lerato is like?
She would be doing her PhD.
Oh.
And she would have done some work. She would have, I'm telling you because there's a secret. Which it's not written yet. Yeah, I've got an outline of it. Yeah, I thought when I finished this book, we can't leave this story hanging like this. What happens to Lerato? What happens to Janine? She goes back to America. Remember, she grew up in America until she was 10 years old, 12 years. Now she's back in America. She's about, when the book ends, she's about to start university in America. As does Lerato. Lerato is about to start university here in South Africa. So I was asking myself, how can we keep the story running? Because I felt the issues that I teased out in this book are even more topical, or more in your face now, in South Africa now. So I thought, to do justice to those issues and themes, I should do a sequel. So that's why I think in the sequel we will see the two ladies, they're young women now, pursuing different things in the academic world, faced with different challenges. Janine is in Boston, Lerato is here in South Africa, and currently with Fees Must Fall and the aftermath of Fees Must Fall, and what is happening now in South Africa. Yeah.
No, because that was also really interesting for me how, like I said, the book is set in 2011, but the frustrations that are expressed in the book, you have to remind yourself that it's 10 years ago, because they are still exactly the same frustrations.
Exactly.
There's one passage which I can't find again, but I think it's where she says, the president is robbing the country blind, the politicians are corrupt, there's rats and Alex, people are just, there's no accountability for people who commit crimes and stuff. And I had to think, oh, when did Jacob Zuma become president? And all of those are things we think about all the time. So this is also a very topical book for all of us. We can all relate to what's going on in the book.
Yeah, so because the deprivation that I explore in this book is getting worse in Alex, not just Alex, but many of our neighborhoods. Infrastructure is going down. I mean, drive in the city center itself. The potholes are massive. Yeah, like bomb craters, So if the city center can be as dilapidated as it is now, imagine areas, neighborhoods, villages, townships like Alex and others, they've been long neglected. Imagine how they are going to fare in the next 5 to 10 years when we watch you know. So I felt I was uh, 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 giving testimony or bearing witness to some of these challenges that we devil in this country.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm going to make a big assumption here, but I'm almost disappointed that we are only like people of color whom I assume are mostly like grew up in townships. And I mean, we all know the hierarchies in townships. I mean, I grew up in Nuclear and Elders, and already that's like, I'm gonna use clumsy words, but it's like a higher status of township than if you grew up in Alex. Also, for example, I mean, I'm from a working class family, but I'm also English speaking in a colored township. That has a different status again. But then you get, in this book, it's set in Alex, and it's set in, so it's not exactly a squatter camp, but it is a residential area. But where people live, there's like 6 households, and there's a communal yard and a communal toilet, and I have never lived like that. That's out of my experience. And I was hoping that for me this is an important book, especially for white middle class people to read, because I think white people actually have no clue how poor South Africans live. And I think sometimes I'm going to say middle class, it's not just white people, that's a bit unfair. But there's a bit of poverty porn. You know, when people look at, like, I know on Facebook, people look at the cover here, and people say, oh, that's such a beautiful color. It's like vibrant colors. It's so pretty, and they look at the girl and say, they can do such interesting things with their looks and everything. That's so amazing. But what came up for me a lot in the book, I felt a little bit almost claustrophobic at sometimes, because I always grew up, although I always lived in a house that had a yard, that had fruit trees, even though it was in a township, okay? Then, for example, you drive through Soweto, the soil is so bad, you can barely even have a garden. Never mind living in a place like Alex, where, there are rats that eat children at night. So for me, there's just that spatial closeness of Alex. I found stunning. And I thought about, when they refer to your golden triangle, it's like where you live, where you work, where you play. And I didn't know where you lived. I made an assumption. I thought you lived somewhere like Parktown or something. But if you live in Wendywood, your golden triangle includes Alex, which you just told us for after hours use. But your golden triangle is also, it's Wendywood, Calvin, Sunnymere, Sandton. That's not a triangle, that's like a quadrilateral something now. But if you live so Lerato and her friends and her peers, their golden triangle is all. Wherever they go, there's poverty and deprivation. And they get out, and when they sneak out, teenage girls, I know this about one of them, lie a lot. The parents don't know when they leave the golden triangle. That's why they get into a lot of trouble and they have to lie again. They get into like sticky situations. But I wanted to ask you, when you were doing research, I mean, I know you've said now you do sometimes go to Alex, but you were saying in your Facebook post, when you're doing your research, you spend more time in Alex. So it wasn't just flitting in and out
No.
to buy some illicit alcohol. You actually, I got the impression, actually spent more time there. How did that affect the way that you see that way of living? But also, did it have an effect on your way of living? Your suburban life?
Yeah, Alex is not all squalor and slum. There are some beautiful houses in Alex. So some of my friends grew up in Alex. So their parents are still in Alex. So I would visit them every now and then. And that's we see it. And there's a place there, before lockdown, they used to have live music, a live band. Remember, a lot of musicians came from Alex, and the African jazz pioneers are from there. Zaxxon Boss is from there. So there is a great musical, Skorokoro, the guy who did Skorokoro is from there. So there's a great musical tradition in Alex. So you walk down the street or drive down the street, there are people sitting on their stoops, they're playing music, and occasionally you will see a live band just playing at random, you know. So that is there, you know, it's part of their culture. Because as I said, there are some richer people, more affluent people still living in Alex. So they become landlords and people rent the bedrooms and so on. So I was fortunate enough that two of my friends are, okay, their parents are landlords there. So you sit down there and you just imbibe. So that helps with the research as well. So you listen to the speech cadences, the slang. I mean, the older you get, the older you grow, the more alienated you get from slang, you know. So when you sit younger people, they kind of update you with latest slang and latest fashion and that kind of thing. So that comes through in the book, hopefully. Yeah. But of course, I had to do some proper kind of. You don't want to say the house is at the corner of Sembuti and the London Road, because those roads never intersect. You see? So because people from there are going to say, "Oh, who's this Paluka?" It doesn't know that Sembuti is on the other side, you know. So I had to take note on basic things like that, and some historical detail about the history of Joe there, of Alex, the Sumi gang of the 50s. Yeah.
No, that brings us nicely into the issue of language, the importance of language, not only in this book, but it also raised for me the issue of language and in literature and in life. So a little while ago I was at a stand-up comedy show, and the comedian, she comes on and she's teasing some woman in the audience, and she says, so it was a white woman in the audience, and she says to her, "Samantha, don't tease me about my accent, because you know I learned to speak English in Zulu." And Lerato at school literally learns to speak English in Zulu because the English teacher teaches them English grammar in Zulu, you know. And so what it means for Lerato and their peers and all of that is that they get left behind in terms of literacy. And when you get left behind, so by the time Lerato gets to high school, she's functionally illiterate, actually. Like in the book, that's where she discovers the joy of reading. That's another just magical part of this book. You know, if you already have the joy of reading, it's always exciting and just heartwarming when somebody else gets it, you know, just that magic of reading. But the only fault behind in literacy and in life is, let's say in the South African context, if you are not English speaking, if you get left behind in English, okay, and that's what I call, it's part of like the arrogance of English, and I'm guilty of it. I'm English speaking, I only speak Afrikaans as well, and then I try learning Zulu, I try learning Sotho, but it's easy to just English, so I never actually really made a concerted effort, and it's actually quite embarrassing to have to admit that, you know. But and in literature, I'm getting to my question, I promise you. This book made me think of Terry Ann Adams. She wrote a book called Those in Little Cages. I don't know if you saw it. So it's set in Eldos. And about a third of that book is written in Afrikaans, because the one character is Afrikaans speaking and her voice is told in her language. And when I read that book, I thought, sheesh, your publisher must have been really unhappy, because I'm sure your sales were shocking. You know, because I knew some people who tried to read the book and just sort of gave up because they thought I'm missing a whole third of this book. So what I wanted to ask you is, if writing a book is like baking a cake, okay, how do you balance the ingredients of language? Because in this book there's reference, obviously, not obviously, the characters, it's in Alex, characters speak all different languages, and some of it is like, you know, in the book. But how do you strike that balance between making the book feel true to your characters, authentic to where it's set? You know, like you said, even the cadence of language, the slang and all of that, but still making it commercially viable so that your book, you know, so that it ends up on that list. It's not the 2 lost books.
Yeah, it's always a challenge. Whatever book I'm writing, because English is not my first language, although I write in English professionally as a newspaper person and so on. Now, when you're writing fiction, the challenge gets kind of escalated because you're trying to capture people's daily speech and speech cadences. So in the book, Lerato is Lerato and her family are Stone speaking, and then there's Janine and her mother who speak English mainly and some Zulu, and Lerato's friends are from. I deliberately made them representative of every language group in South Africa to explore the intricacies of a neighborhood like Alex, because in Alex every language is represented. So you might be sitting, living on one yard, 4, 5, 6 families, different ethnic groups or cultural languages. So I wanted to bring some authenticity through these characters that I brought in. I succeed sometimes, but obviously I can't do justice to them because English does not have that facility to capture accurately some Zulu expressions. Some of the expressions I do a literal translation of, and I leave them like they are, hoping that the reader will make sense of them. Like there's one favorite. In Zulu, we've got an expression that goes, "Abundlovu yasinda ngoba." Ndlovu is an elephant. So no elephant has ever complained about the weight of its trunk. Believe it that. You can make sense of it, can't you? Yeah, exactly. So some Zulu or Sesotho expressions, I just do literal translations and then leave you as a reader to do some work.
Yes. But that's what I found I was also doing because, you know, nowadays you can Google anything. If there's a Zulu word, there's no excuse anymore to say, oh, but I couldn't find the translation. You just Google Translate and it translates from any language to whichever one you like. And I actually found that quite refreshing. I thought for an author, it must feel also like a bit of freedom that you don't always have to translate everything, but you also make the reader, like you say, do some work. Because if English is not your first language and you are reading English books, I'm sure there must be lots of instances where you need to look up the definition of a word. So why not do it for any other language? You know, we can do that now. So yeah, I thought the language was very, it was very South African, the language, and I found it unself-consciously so.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. But I think other people also want to do it, but I want to ask you one more thing. So you remember in the beginning I said, this book, it was light, it was fun, until I got to the end. I had to actually take a moment and analyze what I was feeling about this book. There's all the emotions it evoked in me. And the strongest one is nostalgia. Because, you know, there's cool things that happen in the book. There's the music, like I said, that song, I think I played it about 6 times last night. Yeah, because I didn't know it was these 2 women that sang it. So I was playing that while I was prepping for today. But also stuff like, you know, my father loved cleaning his shoes, sitting on the stoop and cleaning his shoes. Things like, you know, I grew up across the road from flats, which again, another different line of me. Like we lived in a house and flats across the road, which is like living in a big yard. But when you saw the drama of other people's lives, like gang fights in the street, and that boy who annoyed you and you laughed because his mother was giving him a hiding, or just all of those, the fabric of cultured life. And so I felt nostalgia, first of all, for my own childhood, for an earlier time in South Africa. And then, and you that I can maybe have a word for this, I don't have a word for it, but it was like an unpleasant reminder or acknowledgement of how we romanticize the past. That nostalgia, it's a trick that we play on ourselves. Because when you sit and you actually think about it, and you read a book like this, you're reminded how toxic some of these environments are, how toxic childhoods can be, and just, how lively we stay in our lane, and we don't mope, we just get on with it, and we, in our lives, if we all of that, we'll see like, geez, my life has been like punctuated with violence. How did I manage to avoid being raped? I'm a girl who grew up in a township, and then you think about all those near misses here, and it's a dangerous world, and we've survived it so far. And these are the things that the book had me grappling with at the end of it. So, what was your intention with the book?
My forays into Alex as well. There were pockets of nostalgia, as you correctly put it. Because I come from the rough township in KZN as well. And every time I go to Alex and I witness some physical exchange, I'm thinking, by the way, I've been through this as well.
Yeah.
How did I run away that day? And that kind of thing. Jacob Dlamini explores this very beautifully in his book, Native Nostalgia. To say that even though we come from violent and impoverished and deprived neighborhoods, there were some pockets of beauty, corners of beauty that we shouldn't bury under the morass of ugliness and pain. So we elevate the beauty that we can salvage from the dustbins of history. So I tried to do that, to say, even though this is a rough neighborhood, it is still ripe with possibilities, which is why at the end, Lerato manages to get hermetic. Remember at some stage she wanted to quit school. Yeah.
She had big dreams.
Yeah. Anyway, let's not spoil it for the readers. Yeah. So the point I was trying to illustrate here is, yes, it's been gloomy and rough and everything, but you can, as an individual, as a leader, as a South African, salvage some nuggets of beauty from beneath the rubble of ugliness.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Fred, because this book has got so many nuggets of beauty. I advise anybody to read it. It's just, it's just such a trip into a really what could be. It's such a trip into our lives, like everyday life, and I think that's what I really enjoyed about it. We were talking earlier about literary fiction, and all literature has its place. But for me, the things that I most enjoy reading are books that touch me and that make me feel like I have an emotional connection to that book. And I think that's what we have here. So thank you very much, and I'll hand you over to anybody else who has. I'm sure you all have questions, comments.
So the first book that I'm a big fan. I enjoy writing #1, and it has so much. I feel like when I read your books, it's not like writing that is trying to be important. Like I get into the first page and I'm like, oh my god, I know what you're talking about. I can relate. But I'm more curious into like how do you, because every time we write about Black Township, I haven't finished this one, but I read your collection of short stories like Utah, and everything that you describe there, it's still happening, and maybe kind of like aware as well, because sometimes I try not to be aware what's happening around me because I'm gonna stress myself because I'm feed my emotion. But how do you? I don't want to say necessarily write. Like your writing journey, do you do research first, or does an idea comes first? Then how do you build a narrative and a character into the research? Because they are so strong. Every character of yours that you write is so for me is very strong. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. No, it differs from book to book. Obviously, for the two historical novels, Dancing the Death Drill and The Longest March, because they are based on real events, stuff that really happened, I had to do a lot of research. I had to read how the sinking of the SS Mandy was covered by the newspapers of the time in 1917. But of course, the rest of the stuff is imagined. But I had, oh yes, when you're writing a historical novel, you are trying to recreate that era. So you want to imagine how people spoke at the time, because they wouldn't be speaking the kind of IsiZulu that you speak today, or English that you speak today, to be quaint a bit. So I do some research around language, around spatial design and all that. That's for historical books. For short stories, many of them are informed by sometimes stuff that I observe just walking down the street when I'm visiting my folks in KZN, or even here in Joburg, stuff that I overhear, the issues that people deal with or grapple with on a day-to-day basis. But some of them trigger something that reminds me of where I come from. For example, in Talk of the Town, the collection of short stories, the title story there is kind of autobiographical. Because my mother bought furniture from Elevens and Town Talk. So I'm familiar with those scooters that the debt collectors that would come and knock on your door. So it's semi-autobiographical. But in the other collection of short stories, The Court of Mankind, it's more contemporary, because it's dealing with, grappling with contemporary issues, GBV, how it manifests itself in our spaces, in Johannesburg, wherever, all over the country. So how do I decide? It's more, in this instance, I thought of the characters first. There are these girls who like to have fun, but they're from different backgrounds. How do they forge this friendship? And where do I locate them? My initial instinct was to set the story at a private school, where Lelado is a student, but she is from Alex. So there are tensions between her and the other kids from better families. I found the premise shaky and boring, so that I thought that we set it in Alex. But the characters were they are the genesis to the story. I started with the characters, and then I expanded. Yeah.
Did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah. And then, when you're writing, do you ever get personally involved with the character?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
how
Yes.
do you like separate yourself from the character?
Yeah. With the stuff that Lerato was dealing with and Lerato's mother. Because, okay, we don't want to give the story away, but she comes from an era where there was something called jack rolling. Basically, that's what these thugs used to do. It's more than just rape. You know, they'll come to your house. The parents are there. Everyone is there. Point the gun at your father or your mother. They take you away. Yeah, it was called jack rolling. So this woman, Lerato's mother, was victim to that scourge of the time. So that's why it became very personal for me, because I was there. I grew up in that era, and the people I know were touched directly by that. So yeah, so it was like that.
And I know, like Dion Meyer, I remember one, I don't know if you've read any Dion Meyer books, but one of his main characters is a cop called Benny Grissel.
Yes.
And Benny is struggled with alcoholism, and Benny's always getting into trouble at work because, you know, he doesn't like to follow the rules and stuff. And I remember after one, I don't remember which book it was, it was also a book again. And Dion Meyer said, yeah, he's already got the next book. Every time he thinks it's the end of Benny, you'll wake up one night worried about Benny. That's what he said. He said, I'll wake up and I'll be worried, like, geez, what's happened to Benny now? And he says, Benny just has taken over his name.
He's an overwhelming character, Benny. Also, you do get characters like that just take your life away as a writer, which is why I think there's going to be a sequel, because these girls they've just kidnapped me and you know, so to speak.
Got under your skin.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. And wasn't it, was it Conan O'Brien, who wrote, not Conan O'Brien, who wrote Sherlock Holmes? What happens if you're an author and you've got a character who takes over your brain, but you actually don't like that character? How do you kill him off, in a puddle of time? Has that ever happened to you?
Kaulengweni in The Longest March.
Yeah.
He's a character. Yeah. He's repulsive, but I like him. he's a killer. I killed him. So yeah. But if I was writing for a TV soap, I would resurrect it now, because I just like him now.
I think we've got another question over here.
Oh. Inhabiting or appropriating the female voice. I did that with my first novel, Treatise Bull, you remember. One of the narrator is Sislet, a woman in her 40s. So to come to grips with the character, I read a lot of novels written by women, about women, and straight ahead academic writing about sexuality and so on, just to understand the female psyche. And of course, as a journalist, I'm a good eavesdropper. I listen to people's conversations. My wife has got three sisters, and they talk, they gossip, and she's got many friends. They talk, they gossip. What do they talk about? I listen, you know. So it takes a long time to really finally gather enough courage and confidence to create a believable female voice. I tried it with British Bull, with some measure of success. It's always a challenge, and I prevail on the challenge. I enjoy a challenge as a writer because as a man, I sit with men. We talk about politics, cars, women, politics, cars, women. You know, they're so predictable. Yeah. Or at least the people I hang out with. Women talk about many things. Women are good conversationalists. They can tell stories. Guys, okay, you will get one guy who's a good joker who tells jokes and so on. But after a while, that guy gets boring as well because you know his voice already. Women just have varied stories. That's my fascination with women characters, which is why many of my, I think most of my novels have got strong women characters or women voices because they challenge me as a writer. That was the difficult question. The second question was about target market. With this book, yes, I thought, okay, you know what? I think I want to write a book that will primarily resonate with this kind of age group, both boys and girls, but in this age group, maybe from age 14 to 20, whatever. Because the issues that I grapple with, that I tackled in the book, are issues that I felt were relevant to people in that age group. So as a result, because I thought I'm addressing these people, I had to modify my language as well. As a result, you don't get a single F word. My other books are littered with four-letter words.
Yes.
And rough like
Is that disapproval?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's the style we've come to love.
No, but here I thought maybe somebody in the Department of Education would like to prescribe this book so that they can read it at school. Because I feel strongly about the issues. Yeah. So I thought, let me get rid of the F word. As I was writing, the F word would come up. But when I was editing, I said, let's look for all the F words. So I removed them. So target market, target audience can be stifling sometimes. If you always think about the target audience, yeah, it might kill your creativity, your spontaneity in the writing. Yeah. So I hardly think about it in general terms. But in this case, yes, I was thinking, okay, you know what? Let me rein in a bit.
That made me, you made me giggle now because did any of you watch that Super Bowl Sunday halftime show this year? So now you've got Snoop Dogg, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, Dr. Dre, all of them, and you know Anele on 94.7 because it's Super Bowl Sunday, they were not allowed to swim in the mid, that halftime performance, and Anele said, "Geez, I'm glad I wasn't the person who had to tell Snoop, Eminem, guys, you can't curse."
Yeah.
You made me think of that now. Tell yourself, don't swing.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Griffin, anything from you?
I was just going to say, we've got a few people who need to leave, so could we segue to signing and have casual conversation from there? Is that okay?
Yes.
Cool.
So, any closing comments from you?
How do you describe the book?
Did anyone hear the question? In your words, how would you describe the book?
I started and I picked up similar things that you might not and
It's a celebration of friendship and family. I just made it up.
That's why are you the fifth Khumalo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Who are some of your favorite writers and where do you get your inspiration from?
Ooh!
Favorite.
There's a fellow writer, there's some fellow writers here. They can tell it's very difficult to single out one writer.
The most recent favorite book that you've read?
Let me see. I'm a fan of crime writing. Yeah. So, okay.
I want everyone to leave without autographs.
What's his name?
Peggy.
Peggy.
Yes.
So you write also? Okay. Is Lion Matches, are you a writer?
Sorry?
Are you a writer?
No, I'm not a writer, I'm a book reviewer.
Okay.
I'm Roland.
Yes, I forgot. Sorry, Roland, I do apologize.
Thanks.
Sir?
My apologies.
What you must be about lecture books? Just books. What's your life? You've read it. And you find my institutions.
Oh yeah. I read it a long time ago. I read it a long time ago. Yes. Still a thinker.
Yeah.
Yes. South African writers. I was just the other day I was rereading. This is not a novel. It's The Night Trains by Charles van Onsman. It's about Mozambican mine workers coming to South Africa in the 1930s, and it tells me a lot that I didn't know about Mozambican mine workers. For example, that they accounted for 70% of mine workers in South Africa. That's Mozambican workers. And the conditions that they were transported in, because they were not transported in regular normal trains, but in trains that would transport cattle and coal. So they would be standing on their feet all the way from Mozambique to Johannesburg because there are no seats. So it just captures those textures. So I was just rereading that story. You're asking about the recent reads. Yeah, and I'm reading what's Soyinka's the Happy People.
Chronicles from the land of the
Yeah.
happiest people on earth.
Yes, it's a very, very interesting title. Chronicles from the land of the happiest people on earth. Yeah, Wole Soyinka. It's a novel. Yeah. So I'm in the middle of that. So I read across genres and I get inspired. And many of my academic friends look down upon me because I also read Stephen King.
Why?
They say Stephen King is too popular. It's too lowbrow.
But you know, I have a problem, like, for example, people shame, like, for example, 50 Shades of Grey. For me, it's a successful piece. There must be something very important about it. Just because I think that sometimes people have I don't want to call them reading snobs, but they're reading snobs sometimes will judge
They ask
before they're actually even engaged with the actual book. Like, give it a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you read as long as you're reading.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then I'm a fan of crime fiction. I
I
really
love
love
it. I hate it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, one more question. How did you feel when David compared to one for you as a South African?
I was very happy because we haven't won that prize in a long time. The last time we won it, it was with Jane Couture for Disgrace. And the other person who won it from South Africa was Nadine Gordon some years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. And we are producing a lot of good books in South Africa. But for books to be considered for those prizes over there, for example, the book should have been published in the UK. It's So it can be a good book as long as it's published only in South Africa. It is not eligible for that prize. So we miss out on it.
Wait, can I ask something? In terms of like a publishing house, like for example, Pan Macmillan, we have a publisher here and also overseas. Let's say if Pan Macmillan publishes his book, okay, Penguin Random House, for example, this one.
Yeah.
And then can you submit your work to be nominated?
No,
it has to be originally from the country.
No. Let's say Dancing with the Devil was published here and in the UK. So the UK edition would have been eligible for this prize. But the South African edition, so
You know, there's no difference in the book.
no, it's not. It's published here, so it's not eligible. They're very strict. So as a result, a lot of really good books from South Africa and the rest of the continent, as long as they are published here, are not eligible for some of the prizes over there. The Costa Prize in the UK, the Booker, and many others. So because the Booker is a big thing for a writer.
Yeah.
You know that. So it changes your life. So I was happy for Dave because he's been writing for a long time.
Yeah.
He's been writing for a
You
long
know the
time.
promise.
Yes.
I've tried, and I just found out, wow.
Mm.
Personally, I just got into a point where I feel like you're trying to, well, you know, but like, if your ideas and you're trying to be very complicated, it's not a simple story. How did you find it?
I was just explaining to Alicia that the storyline was okay, but what appealed to me is the artistry, the writing itself. Yeah, it's very different. It's very different. The storyline wasn't for me, but the writing itself, the artistry, is great. Oh, there's another question.
Yes. Hi, Fred. My name is Afrika. So my question is for listener. Do you know Operation Tutula?
Yes.
Yes. So if you were to write a novel on Operation Tutula, would Nhlanhla be the hero or the villain? Thank you.
I don't believe in heroes, and I believe in main protagonists and so on. Could be the anti-hero. The notion of heroes in books doesn't really work for me because I like some really bad guys in novels. Really bad guys who kill people, but I like them. So Lux, incidentally, there's going to be a story in City Press this coming Sunday on the guy.
Oh.
Yes, so read City Press.
Oh,
Whispering. No, he is a fascinating character,
Yeah.
a very engaging
Yeah,
character,
yeah.
and what he's doing. Yeah. So I wouldn't know how to deal with him.
So I was reading the book, right? It is funny, but then there is a point whereby like when you read, like it starts getting deeper, and then you start reflecting in yourself and then your surroundings, like things that you see, things that happen. And I like the fact that you included a lot of things, like in terms of homosexuality, xenophobia, it was there. So I just wanted to know, like in terms of your view when it comes to issues like xenophobia, issues like homophobia, like how can you address that, like to your peers that seem to be not to be doing in terms of how people are different?
I try to do that through my writing. In this book, and also in The Longest March. In The Longest March, the guy I've just referred to, Khumalo, he's a queer guy, and the story is set in 1899. And that is based on proper research, because there were homosexual guys on the march, openly so. But now there's a narrative, a dominant narrative right now, which says no, queerdom and homosexuality is a white construct. It came with white people, which is wrong, because it's there in our history. It's just that it was not an issue. People were not attacked for being queer, for being gay, or whatever. So I felt the question you ask is, how do I conscientize people my age and so on? I can only do it through writing because that's what I do. And I've done that through the novels that I've written, and I do it through my newspaper columns.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Samuel Khumalo. I have a privacy-seeking questions. It came into my attention that many some authors they prefer to write a story first before establishing a title. So how do you find it like in establishing a title? How do you establish a title and the logic behind establishing a title of a book?
Yeah, a title is something that comes much later in general, to me in general terms, yeah. I don't think about the title until much later. Sometimes I come up with the title and publishers say, no, this title is not going to work. We debate about that. So a title is not a major thing really. Yeah. So you don't allow it to stand in the way of the story. Just tell a story and the title will come.
Speaking of titles, what inspired this title, specifically Two Tones of Time?
Yes. The one issue that I deal with in the book is body shaming. You know, these kids, the two major characters here, Khumalo and Jenny, are big girls. So they have a way of fighting back against body shaming. They laugh about it, they dance about it. So I call them the two, or their uncle, Lerato's uncle, who's a much older person. And they don't know, they've never done anything like that. So they say, how do we sell this? Yeah. So you get rejected for different reasons, not because it's bad, maybe because they don't know how to sell it.
Can we expect another historical novel?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Great.
On the whole topic of unpublished books, do you have like a rough estimate of how many like unpublished manuscripts or half-written books you have? How many like unpublished manuscripts or half-written books you have that's like just in the book graveyard?
I've got many unfinished manuscripts. This is my son, he's being naughty.
Oh, I didn't know he was reading those on. Oh, is it all the files and files? I think we're ready to wrap. Griffin, am I allowed to say there's still wine and snacks?
There's still wine and snacks in the back.
Please continue the conversation.
Please, and Fred, if you don't mind sitting there for a minute, we'll send people with the books to sign
Sure.
to you there. And yeah, thanks everybody so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.